nation join under our wing. Let the world see us as we spin about the globe, rising above on our wings, sing the future about the clouds, join together as one and rise together. Come along with us to celebrate our century.
Conquering the blue sky, a centenary of aviation.
And I expect to attain flight in the air.
Curiosity has always had a remarkable impact on the inborn talents of man to change the forward march of the world and to re-engineer what existed. Traveling by foot has been very much replaced by traveling through air. As a result of untiring efforts of Wright brothers, man has been able to undertake air travel. It's indeed a huge moment for Sri Lanka, where we celebrate 100 years of air travel. It is time to bring back those sweet memories. We are still proud of those marvels of King Ravana. That is why we take so much of pride in celebrating the centenary of aviation services in Sri Lanka.
අපේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ගුවන් සේවය අත්ත වශයෙන් පටන් ගත්තේ ටාටා එයාර්ලයින්ස් එකෙන් මෙහාට චැපල් ප්ලේන් එකක් ඒම ඒක තමයි ඩ්‍රැගන් රැපීඩ් එක. ඒක පයිලට් කෙරුවේ කැප්ටන් ඩේවිඩ් පීරිස්. එයා ඉන්දියාවට ගිහිල්ලා ට්‍රේන් වෙලා ටාටා එකට බැඳිලා ඒකෙන් තමයි පැසෙන්ජර් සර්විස් එක පටන් ගත්තේ.
At the dawn of the 20th century, a lot of people were interested in air travel. But only Wilbur and Orville Wright got that opportunity first. It took barely 8 more years to introduce air travel to Sri Lankan skies after the historic innovation in 1903. Colin Brown was instrumental in importing the first ever aeroplane to Sri Lanka. During the initial stages, it was meant for exhibition rather than for air travel purposes. People had come in numbers to witness this magic machine after buying tickets. This aeroplane, which was brought to Sri Lanka on a vessel in 1911, was taken to the skies only after several misstarts. On the 7th of December 1912, the first ever air travel was successful from Colombo Racecourse grounds, which was converted to a runway track. It was George Vermick and Mark Popre who got the first opportunity of taking an aircraft to the Sri Lankan skies.
පළමුවෙන්ම ගෙනාවේ මෙහාට ටයිගමොත් එයාක්‍රාෆ් වාගයක් ටයිගමොත් එයාක්‍රාෆ් එකක් ගෙනාවා. එයාෆෝස් එකේ හිටපු ෆ්ලයිට් ලෙෆ්ටනන්ට් ඩන්කන්සන් කියලා කෙනෙක්ව ගෙනාවා ඉන්ස්ට්‍රක්ටර් කෙනෙක් වශයෙන්. ඒක තමයි ෆ්ලයිಯಿಂග් ක්ලබ් එක පටන් ගත්තේ.
After 1912, air travel activities were carried in a very low tone for several years. The inauguration of the Aviation Club in 1928 was a breakthrough moment in the history of aviation sector in Sri Lanka. This paved the way to import more aeroplanes to Sri Lanka and build necessary infrastructure for this task. It was a historical moment to witness an aeroplane taking off from the racecourse to travel to India during this period. There was another important incident which took place during the period from 1912 to 1931. During this time, a group of Tamil people who had migrated to Malaysia had bought an aeroplane to help activities during the World War. The name of the plane was Jaffna. The next historical incident is airmail service. Even before the birth of Wright brothers in 1850, can you believe that Sri Lanka had this service in place? Our ancestors had the talent of sending messages using pigeons. The airmail service, which is an advancement of that particular concept, came into existence in 1931. The auspicious flight of an aeroplane to Sri Lanka took place on the 31st of March 1931, when Neville Vincent, a South African, came to Sri Lanka for an airmail service from India.
යාසිලෝන එකක් පටන් ගන්න ලෑස්ති වෙලා ඉන්නකොට මම බෝස්ටන් ටෙක්නිකල් ඩිපාර්ට්මන්ට් එකේ ඇප්‍රෙන්ටිස් රේඩියෝ ඉන්ජිනේර් කෙනෙක් වෙලා හිටියා. ඉතින් අපි 5 දෙනෙක්ව ඇරියා රත්මලාන එයාපෝට් එකට. ඒක හරින්න ඒකෙත් ඔක්කොම චෙක් කරන්න කියලා සමහරක් ඒවා වැඩ කරන්නේ නැහැ. අපි ඒවා ඔක්කොම රිපෙයාර් කරුවා.
The emergence of Ratmalani Airport was another defining moment in this century. The first ever aircraft landed in Ratmalana on the 27th of November 1934. Ratmalana, which started in a small scale, later was expanded to a 600-yard runway covering an area of 242 acres. Sir John Kothalavala, the then minister, contributed immensely towards this end. This is Sri Lanka's first ever international airport.
යුද්ධයට පෙර ගුවන් හමුදාවක් අපිට තිබුණ නැහැ. රාජකීය ගුවන් හමුදාවේ කොටසකුත් තිබුණ නැහැ. යුද්ධයේ කාලෙදී ලංකාවේ ජනතාව යුද්ධයට සහභාගී දුන්නා. ඒ වගේම අපේ ලංකාවේ අය කීප දෙනෙක්ම බ්‍රිතාන්‍යයට ගිහිල්ලා බ්‍රිතාන්‍යයේ රාජකීය ගුවන් හමුදාවට බැඳිලා එහෙත් සටන් කෙරුවා.
1939 brings back another memory. It was the inauguration of the Royal Air Force. This resulted in establishing services for both security and civil sectors. This service, which was taken forward by Aero Club of Ceylon, was influential for the developments in the aviation quarter. Putlam Airport was also inaugurated in the same year on the 3rd of June by Sir John Kothalavala. Owing to the activities of the Aero Club, opportunity was created for private pilots to get themselves trained. This resulted in private enthusiasts undertaking training to obtain an air license. It was a special day for all Sri Lankans. Dunstan De Silva was qualified as the first ever person to hold an air license, and the second in line was Sir John Kothalavala. The 1940s were quite significant due to the developments that took at the global level, especially the Second World War. In order to facilitate the activities of the Second World War, an Air Force unit was established at Ratmalana in 1942. During the same year, Minneri Airport also came into existence. In 1942, an aeroplane of Royal London Air Force came to Sri Lanka from Karachi and landed at the Koggala Airport. In the same year, on 5th of April, Japanese aeroplanes started bombing Colombo. During this time, Japanese also bombed the China Bay in Trincomalee. Though Sri Lanka lost several lives due to these bombings, Ceylon Royal Air Force took utmost measures to minimize the damage. During this grandiose decade, the Department of Civil Aviation Services was inaugurated in 1946 under the Ministry of Communications and Public. Air Ceylon was set up in 1947. During the latter part of 1940s, Sri Lanka was considered a beautiful country with peace and harmony. The climatic condition and the natural beauty always had an appealing attraction towards inviting everyone to take a private air tour. Therefore, the Air Academy was established at Ratmalana in 1950 to train private pilots. As a result, the skies of Sri Lanka got developed and busy during the early part of 1950s. In order to control this situation, the air traffic control was set up. The first ever chief was Terry Dharmasena. Though the communication technology was not developed during that period, measures were taken to carry out these activities methodically. This symbol base air traffic control system was undoubtedly quite instrumental in implementing the present-day digital mechanism.
බ්‍රිතාන්‍ය ලංකාවට උදව් කෙරුවා ගුවන් හාමුදාවක් පටන් ගන්න. ඒ වෙලාවේ මේ බ්‍රිතාන්‍යයෙන් ගරුප් කැප්ටන් බ්ලේඩ් කියලා එක්කෙනෙක් එව්වා 1950. එයා ඉස්සරලගේ අපිට මොකක්වත් තිබුණේ නැහැ, කඳවුරක් මොකක්වත් තිබුණේ නැහැ. එයාගේ පළවෙනි ඔෆිස් එක තිබුණේ මේ ගෝල්ෆේස් හොටෙල් එකේ. ඒ පළවෙනි කඳවුර තමයි පාසන්ස් රෝඩ් එකේ දැන් සර් චිත්තම්පලම් ගාඩ්න මාවතේ රයිෆල් ග්‍රීන් හවුස් එක.
The civil aviation sector started another success story after the Second World War. The family of airports, which consisted of Ratmalana, Negombo, Colombo Racecourse, Katukurunda, China Bay, Sigiriya, Vaunia, Jaffna, Kalamatiya, Koggala, Dambulla, Putlam and Veeravilla, was further expanded with the addition of Ampara, Anuradhapura and Trincomalee. During the same year, the first ever jet from Sri Lanka took off from Negombo. In 1959,